Why has nobody in the military leadership of the United States been held accountable for the 13 American service members killed during Biden's botched Afghanistan withdrawal, or for all the failures of ours in Iraq? Trillions of dollars spent, thousands of lives lost, and to what end? When is the last time America won a real war outright? And the answer, by the way, is World War II.
Trillions of dollars spent, thousands of lives lost. Laura Ingraham cares about that money and those lives lost now. Apparently now, because they're debating more on this emergency Ukraine relief as Russia, as we know, has invaded Ukraine, and they're looking for more assistance as this continues on and on to more and more months. Now, Laura Ingraham, you would be surprised to see she's this, peacenik. She's a tree-hugging, anti-war peacenik. She wants some response, some accountability for the people who are responsible for things, especially Iraq and Afghanistan, those debacles. If only we had a little bit of accountability, people who were cheerleading and pushing that war. Let's go to Laura Ingraham's piece that she wrote in 2003, around the time that we went into Iraq. She was talking about the Dixie Chicks and their anti-war stance and how they're embarrassed they were of George W. Bush at the time. So Natalie Maines, who is one of the singers of Dixie Chicks, she's writing, her outburst is simply the latest and loudest of the caterwauls coming from those who believe they're intellectually and morally superior to the average American who supports this president and his view of the dangers posed by Saddam. Oops. Again, this is 2003. Most of what we hear from the anti-war crowd hasn't been reasoned debate. It has served only to foment anti-American sentiment abroad. Those like Maines, who go overseas to malign our leaders, merely help those who are cheering on the demise of America's global superpower status.
Oops.
When hit with the charges of anti-war Americanism, these elites invariably respond with the quote, support the troops, but not the war. But why take their word for it? When the war is over, when Saddam is gone, and when the hidden weapons caches are on display for the world to see, and when the Iraqis are living in freedom, we must not allow anyone to forget the obstacles we had to clear to make it all happen. The French.
It's like every bad statement, it's every bad take humanly possible.
She's not done. The French and their ideological soulmates here in the US will try to wallpaper over their previous comments and actions. Who's gonna hold them accountable? I'm curious, which one of these weak libs and their wallpapering over all the facts and their previous comments against Iraq, what are they gonna say, Laura? Let's watch.
I mean, I think there's often the assumption that the media is leftist or liberal, and maybe they are, but when it comes to war, they are consistently on the side of militarism, imperialism, and more conflict. Going all the way back to 2003 when they liked nothing about George Bush or Dick Cheney, but overwhelmingly the New York Times, NBC News were behind the invasion of Iraq.
Now, I was one of those who was lured into the naive ideas about Iraq and even nation building. I finally saw the light, thank goodness.
Laura Ingraham finally saw the light because she was into that nation building and the war in Iraq that somebody duped her into. As Glenn Greenwald just said that, those libs, they're bloodthirsty and they want more wars. Apparently Laura Ingraham was a former lib because that's just the way those things work. Now, one more thing on the accountability. She's looking for accountability, and when are we gonna hold people responsible for what they did in Iraq and Afghanistan? There's this guy who came in after W. Bush and he was asked, what are you gonna do about those war criminals? This is what he had to say.
Will you appoint a special prosecutor, ideally Patrick Fitzgerald, to independently investigate the gravest crimes of the Bush administration, including torture and warrantless wiretapping?
We're still evaluating how we are going to approach the whole issue of interrogations, detentions, and so forth. And obviously, we're going to be looking at past practices. And I don't believe that anybody is above the law. On the other hand, I also have a belief that we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards. My general belief is that when it comes to national security, what we have to focus on is getting things right in the future, as opposed to looking at what we got wrong in the past.
Tonight on Laura Ingram's show, she's gonna ask Obama how come he didn't take care of those war criminals from the Bush administration.
No, but that's actually, in essence, what they're doing now. And so this is why I tell Democrats, never agree with Republicans. They'll always use it against you. Always hold them accountable. They'll use it against you if you don't hold them accountable. That's exactly what Laura Ingram's doing. Guys, two things here. One is the sleight of hand. Laura Ingraham says, oh, the war is awesome. We should definitely go to war. Anyone who's against the war is terrible. She wrote a whole book about how the Chixie Dicks, that was funny. Dixie Chicks, okay, should shut up and sing. That was the title of the book, Shut Up and Sing. Forget freedom of speech, how dare you oppose the war? Now she says, God damn it, why isn't anybody being held accountable for being wrong about Iraq? That is unbelievable. But that's because of the second factor here, which is that Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, all the right wing, certainly Donald Trump, everyone on the right has realized, oh, our viewers and our voters don't mind lying at all. And they never look anything up. So I'll just pretend I was against the war, who cares? And I'll be like, oh, goddamn, why wasn't? Oh, you know what? When Obama said we look forward, we don't look backward, that was already a debacle. That means we're not gonna hold any of the criminals accountable because all the crimes are by definition in the past. If you only look forward, you missed them, okay? And what do we always tell you guys? When the Democrats make the mistake of agreeing with the Republicans will punish them. And now they are, now turning around and going, Carl, why didn't Obama hold people accountable? Why isn't anybody holding anybody accountable? Unreal.
My biggest beef with this is, you hear these Republicans like Laura Ingraham complain about Afghanistan. It's telling that these people look at the 13 people who died in Afghanistan, who, of course, that was a tragic event, but they look at these 13 people who died in Afghanistan the same way that they look at those 4 deaths in Benghazi, and they frame them as the most catastrophic events in US history, second to none. And yet, in the same breath, while Trump was overseeing 400,000 deaths from COVID, a 9/11's worth of deaths every single day, and pretending it wasn't real and saying it would go away with the heat and prescribing bleach to cure it, they were cheering him on like the guy was Churchill,
Yeah, 100%. In fact, here, I'm gonna go to one of our members here. We do the show with our members. tyt.com/join to become one. Naughtiest Maximus says, and who, Laura Ingraham, negotiated a deal with Afghanistan and the Taliban for withdrawal? Donald Trump.
Sure did.
Okay, everything is sleight of hand. Okay, Trump did it, no, now we're blaming Biden, right? And Brian is indisputably right. If you're upset about 13 Americans who died, how about 400,000 that died that didn't need to die because you told them that they shouldn't take the vaccines and that COVID was no big deal, etc. And then one more thing for me, Glenn Greenwald. So he goes on there and he says, oh, can you believe the liberals at the New York Times lied you into that war? Okay, by the way, that is true and fair. The New York Times was terrible on that. And we were on the air. We were one of only 2 national shows saying, don't go to Iraq, don't, it's a terrible idea, right? And of course, we were called traitors and all those things, right? And the New York Times was awful. You know who was worse? By far, by a lot, Fox News. And they're on Fox News. The one media network that is most responsible for the Iraq war by a lot. They made the New York Times look like child's play. Every day, propaganda, 24 hours a day, and that affects CNN, MSNBC. In fact, MSNBC internal memos showed that they fired Phil Donahue because they were worried that Fox News looked more patriotic than they did. Fox News was like, war, 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 war. And now Glenn Greenwald comes out and goes, oh my God, this beautiful Fox News is against war. I mean, they're so innocent on the goddamn New York Times. That's another sleight of hand.
It's tiring.
Well, that liberal company Halliburton benefited, So how can you really blame them?
Yeah. So Halliburton, of course, Dick Cheney's former company. Dick Cheney got a $34 million golden parachute, and then all of a sudden the Iraq War started, and Halliburton made billions of dollars. Well-known liberals at Halliburton and all the mercenaries and all the defense contractors. No, it was the right wing and the corporations that made all of the money from the Iraq war, and Fox News and Laura Ingraham loved it, and they're lying to you in the most disingenuous ways today. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.